Welcome, eCom Logistics Nation. Thank you for joining today's episode. We're on a mission to share e-commerce logistics insights, trends, successes, and challenges from the leaders and innovators in our space.
You cannot do all of this alone. You need the power of partnerships, the power of value chain, the power of being very clear on what the requirements are and working together with people. Right now, supply chain is global, so that increases the need for visibility, transparency, and partnerships across the globe.
Welcome to the eCom Logistics Podcast. Excited to be continuing our series, shining the light on women leadership in supply chain, retail, and e-commerce throughout the month of March. Our special guest today is Supriya Iyer, Director, Global Networking, Supply Chain, and Commercial Operations at none other than Google. Supriya leads supply chain and commercial operations for Google's Global Networking division, with a focus on predictable materials supply and operations to operate the network at global scale. She is a business leader with 20 plus years of experience, has held global leadership positions at VMware, GE, and Imperial Chemical Industries. She embraces the values of integrity, inclusions, belonging, and leading with empathy. Supriya holds a master's degree in computer science, a master's degree in mathematics. Supriya, so excited to have you joining us today, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dan. That was some introduction, kind words. But no, it's a Friday afternoon. We're going to be talking about all things supply chain, fulfillment, logistics, topics close to our hearts. So I'm super excited to be able to have this chat with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Welcome, Supriya.
Yes, absolutely. Welcome. And, we'd love to start by hearing your amazing journey. And from what I've read, what we've read, it sounds like you had amazing parents that supported you and encouraged you to follow your dreams, teachers that saw something special in you, encouraging you at a young age to take on leadership roles and serve the school and community. And, as mentioned in the introduction, we're highlighting women in supply chain leadership. And I'm very confident that your story will encourage other women, including my 3 daughters, to go after their dreams. So would love if you could share your very interesting journey with us.
Oh, Dan, that's very, very kind of you. I think we all have a story to tell, and our lives and stories take us in different directions. And opportunities like this give us a chance to reflect, look back and reflect. And we all stand on the shoulders of giants. We all stand on the shoulders of mentors and people who have been great coaches. So my parents certainly have done that for me. So have great teachers. So have the managers that I worked with. But if you are a seeker at heart, you do find people who can coach you, right? This conversation today, we're all going to learn from each other. So I think if you come with an open mind and heart and curiosity, then, doors open to you, people open to you, and you learn and you grow together. My background was mathematics and computer science. I started truly working in Australia. But before that, while I was doing my engineering, every summer I used to work in a different corporation. Those things gave me real insights of how organizations work. They're an artificial construct, but how do they really work? What do the different departments do? And I was especially fascinated by working across the value chain, operational work, supply chain work. At that point, I didn't quite know the terminology. But my first role in Australia was in the space of supply chain. And it was also implementing lean. And I had the advantage of having managers and leaders who truly guided me. So getting that exposure to automotive industry, manufacturing was my first foray into supply chain. With that, I did more in continuous and discrete manufacturing in organizations such as GE Polymer Shapes, now called GE Materials. After that, as you said, I was in ICI, VMware, and now at Google for the last 7+ years. So from making the components or being a first-year supplier to automotive, to building the world's world's largest network. But it all comes back to supply chain. Is supply chain, the first principles do not change. What has, I think, the last 20 plus years have taught me is that you cannot do all of this alone. You need the power of partnerships, the power of value chain, the power of being very clear on what the requirements are and working together with people. Right now, supply chain is global. So that increases the need for visibility, transparency, and partnerships across the globe.
That is phenomenal. And I guess there is a lot to dig in over there, but I think just for our audiences and even, we discussed this during the prep call, but I think it would be great if we understand like what kind of supply chain you manage today within Google, right? Like what's your portfolio? Like what is that day-to-day function, or what mission critical objectives do you achieve today?
So Nina, this like I'm smiling because every day when you wake up, they say that you're not somebody just laying stones, you're building a cathedral kind of thing. So when the day kind of when things become too much or overwhelming, I have to just kind of remind myself that I'm a very small cog in building the world's largest network, and that again kind of gives me a renewed sense of purpose. So basically, I provide the materials to build the Google network that supports not just Google Search, YouTube, and other Google product areas, but also supports Google Cloud and Google Cloud's customers, enterprise customers. So these are customers in telecom, these are customers in retail, financial institutions. So, and when I talk about networking, it's the part that links from what is within the data center to the edge. So we call it edge, peering, and POPs, so points of presence. So basically connecting the world, right? Connecting the world and both terrestrial and subsea. So the sheer joy of being part of something like that, just makes me bound and excited every single day. The complexity is huge, the ambiguity is huge, the challenges are huge, but the joy and sense of purpose is huge.
I'm trying to control myself, just trying to think about the sheer scale of what you just said, right? Like just literally, I would assume it's every country on the face of the planet that you are trying to achieve. Like we are talking about supply chain that literally extends across the entire globe, the entire network. You got anything in Antarctica or in the Arctic Circle?
Everywhere,
Exactly.
everywhere, right? Think about it. And it's both terrestrial and subsea. So, it's under the ocean, it's on land, and it extends, it goes through, different countries, through a farmer's field. It is everywhere. So.
Yeah, and it's not just to ride the of course, the consumer side of things, but it's also mission critical, defense, healthcare, that all depends on it being up and running all the time. Just
all the time, customers are running their businesses on it. You said it right, Nina. That is, it is healthcare. It is. Think about the crisis, even during war, when a country is limited, any country or any difficult situation, natural disaster, where they have no way to kind of access the external world. Google's network is there.
Yeah, with all due respect to CSCOs and whatnot of retail and e-commerce and whatnot, I have to say what you do and the level of mission criticality, and not just you and your team and Google, it is absolutely astounding, right? Just the sheer scale of what needs to be achieved and the sheer redundancy, the amount of planning that goes into it to ensure that it just is constantly up and running. Just may I say thank you for your service, I guess.
No, as I said, working in this space itself is, I think, it's a gift. It truly is if you get excited about things like this. And, I have loved everything I've done in supply chain, whether it be building a car, whether it be building mining explosives. That was part of my job at some point. So they used to call them IEDs, mining explosive, to detonate mines so that, but this somehow talks. I think it brings it all together, right?
Yeah.
To be doing something like this and solving for those greater problems and new challenges. And now, I know we are all going to talk about it. Both you and Diana are also very passionate about this AI and ML. And as more customers start doing it, Google is best positioned that we have the stack to be able to help organizations leverage AI and ML, and truly get those kind of insights which help them to disrupt whatever domains that they are in the coming years.
Yeah, so maybe if you can help a little bit understand that, because in my experience working on client projects or initiatives, you always see either Google or Microsoft coming to the table talking about their cloud offerings, Azure, GCP, and there is this specialized line of GCP cloud solutions that are, supply chain centric, like route planning capabilities, or utilizing Google Brain to be able to do like trends and patterns, listing, supply chain planning services, BigQuery, etc. I'm guessing, and interestingly for the audiences, the tool that we use for recording this podcast, when Supriya joins, it says unsupported browser. That the reason why it says that is because Supriya is probably running a version of the browser that we don't have at this point because she's inside Google. And I'm guessing the same thing is applicable when you look at the services at your disposal from a machine learning and from a AI standpoint. Of course, you probably have the biggest AI brain out there. How do you leverage that? And without, as much detail as you can share, but like, how do you leverage that from a planning standpoint? How does it help you get through some of the challenges that we face today, specifically with, pandemic, or be it, resiliency around some of the changing geopolitical dynamics in the world? You have to get mission critical stuff to the places that it needs to go.
So Google Cloud, GCP's enterprise customers, they get the full stack on GCP, and behind that is the Google network, right? So these customers also come to us and talk about designing new products, which helps them to kind of increase their reach, increase their business revenue, increase their customer, size. So yes, absolutely. There are a lot of ways in which we leverage. So any technology, any of the AI, ML we talked about customers, a lot of those use cases are how we use it within Google. Right. We also talked about a lot of people who probably listen to this are also mid-sized companies. So there is a maturity before you're able to truly leverage AI, ML. So I just want to focus about know your data, know what you need to run your business. Make sure that the data health is in a good place. And then you can leverage AI and ML, right? Because there's a certain maturity. Beyond that is where you have to train your ML models, and you do need absolutely power, you need capacity, and that's where GCP comes into place, and the Google network that underpins that kind of capacity, delivery, storage, compute capacity comes into play.
Absolutely.
Right. So absolutely, Google uses AI, ML, and all of our, algorithms, all of the work that we do across the different PAs, be it YouTube, be it search. And should every organization look at what does it mean for them, how it is going to help them disrupt their space in the coming years? Absolutely.
And maybe on that, just as something I'm curious about and I've been thinking about, haven't been able to figure it out, maybe you have, is as we talk about generative AI, right? And you are seeing specifically ChatGPT, and now I just got an email from Google yesterday saying, come join Bard, right? So where do you see generative AI play in, the supply chain space, or do you see a use case at this point within the supply chain? Specifically, because I've been struggling with that one.
Right. So it is a matter of trying it out, right? We are all playing with it. So we obviously started using Bard a little bit before all of this. So we are also playing and learning. But a lot of it kind of simplifies. It brings information. When I look at, I even type all these things into Bard, say, hey, what are the top issues? Can I summarize this particular issues with this vendor or something like that? It brings all of this together in a very good manner. So even if I want to, we have all been trying and we have been talking about it internally. We want to write an article on this. What does this looks like? What Bart comes back with is super impressive. But we've got to also understand that you still need the human overview. Over time, we're going to refine it. We're going to develop it. So that is where people say, why is Google or anybody saying, hey, try it, test it, it's still work in progress, because it will always be something that we have to further develop. How do we use generative AI in our work? We are using right now more of ML in the supply chain that I work, where we are kind of connecting the information. So the work is done in a particular space. We need more input across the value chain. We are using ML and AI to kind of define that, right? Bring all of those together, stitch it together. So the insights are much crisper. They're easily served to you, especially when you're talking about huge amounts of data. So it is enabling decision making. The next thing would be to use generative AI to recommend a decision, right? And that's how you would use it. It's all layered on and then see, you make your decision, you look at this and say, wow, would I have come to the same conclusion? Let me understand how this came about. So again, as I say, it's iterative. It's not one and done at any point in.
Absolutely.
Right? And that is the power. It's not going to displace. I think it is about where are you choosing to focus.
It will enhance, it will enrich. I'm looking to hire someone in a director of something position. And it's like, yeah, I can sit there and think about and write what the job description can be. Or I can just ask, be like, hey, what should be the job description? Then I'm only doing 10% refinement on it. Not that I'm incapable of writing it, but it just saved me time.
I thought you wrote that.
It just saves me time,
I thought you wrote that, Ninad.
No, I did not. I'm a really good prompt engineer. Let's just say that. So,
but this is what I think. We all talk about the imposter syndrome with AI and generative AI. We're constantly going to be the imposter, but Dan is going to be, Supriya, I thought you wrote that book. Or Ninad, I thought you wrote the job description. It's like, no, it was 80% Bard and 20% us. And I think we've got to learn to be okay with that.
yeah.
And that is where I think this whole concept of partnerships also come, whether it's other organizations, whether it's partnering for others for capabilities that you don't have, whether it could be data capabilities, it could be capability around process or something else that you need to do. That we got to be comfortable with relying on each other, partnering with transparency, greater visibility to drive bigger things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think generative AI is just another example.
Yeah, like think about like your entire partner ecosystem. If the goals are predefined, right? Like you go into your team's annual meeting, go, here are my goals as a company, right? Like I need my SLAs to be at 98.5%, inventory accuracy at 99.9, vendor compliance at this level. It could, if you are going into a QBR, be like, I'm going in a QBR with this particular partner, right? Give me the bullet points. Or it could just generate the information that says, hey, here's your alignment with our goals. This is what we are trying to achieve. This is what needs to be done. Here's how you have performed based on all the data that we have available on you, right? And can your team extract that? Yes. Well, wouldn't it be cool if the team didn't have to sit there extracting all of that stuff and just it is ready in front of you? And it gives you contextual alignment, right? Like it looks at a broader picture within the organization. So
it does. And it does need still your oversight. It still needs leaders to still lead with empathy, get to the next thing. So that is still needed. But yes, it takes a lot of the toil away. And a lot of the work, especially when people do in supply chain, especially during the pandemic, has been about rework, expediting, de-expediting, prioritizing, deprioritizing, shaping the demand, understanding the supply. So it has been a lot of that work that always doesn't add huge value, but it's a lot of toil. So some of this, if we can remove that, simplify it, streamline it, make it much faster. I mean, we're all looking for that accuracy, but also agility, right? So if you need that, that is where leveraging technology and having the capacity to be able to do that becomes really, really powerful. But Nina, what you also said is like, you could be an individual, you could be an influencer, you could be a small organization, medium size, or the size of a Microsoft or a Google. all have this power to harness this in many intelligent ways. We just have to think, if we open our minds, expand about what can we ask.
Yep.
Right? I think that's where you say, how are you using? I'm like, God, I just feel I've dipped my toe in this. You just have to kind of just be disruptive, ask everything and see what comes back and see, what is the potential of this. So I think that is huge.
We are actually, you make an extremely good point. We are actually limited by our capability to think about the prompt. Because what I've realized is, I'm like, of course, I can't ask a machine this question and it will surprise you that it has an answer, right? Again, the answers are being refined, the model's still learning, right? There is competing models, there is all sorts of stuff happening, but it is actually restricted by how open are you about asking the question, because you kind of have a block. Be like, I can't ask this question. How can it have this contextual understanding? And it does. And yeah, I think the surprising part is going to be like, how we grew up, no internet, then there is internet, and we had to kind of learn and go through the motions. At least I'll say my kids are going to grow up where it is going to be second nature about, things of this, generative AI type of stuff. But for us, it's going to take a little bit of time to like train ourselves into it. So.
But think about the possibilities, right? In healthcare, we say we go to a doctor, they're so specialized, so they're doing down a certain area. But when you think of functionally across, to put all of your reports, symptoms, something to come back to say why, bringing that lever. So multiple times you go to multiple specialists, or even in an organization, it happens, right? You go to someone, they see the problem in a certain way, go to someone else. So we are so boxed and modular. So how do you get this kind of continuous end-to-end kind of thinking, root causing, coming up with the right solution? So the power is limitless. And how do we harness it? How do we use it? And I think, Ninad, you said it well. The limitation is our imagination.
Exactly. Yeah, love it.
Right?
Yeah, love it. And I want to actually go back, Supriya, to something you had mentioned before. I mean, when we think about Google and you building the world's largest network. And for those that are just listening, if you're watching it on YouTube, you're going to see every time she says that, she has a huge smile on her face, because it does bring a lot of joy. You can tell you love what you're doing, and it comes across in such a genuine way that hits me every time. So appreciate your love for what you do. But when we had our prep call too, your philosophy and your approach on building partnerships and ecosystems, obviously you're doing this at massive global scale. But if you think about, a mid-market supply chain organization or, a smaller organization, a lot of times those companies are, they have issues relinquishing power or duties, and they want to take things on. And I think the way you describe how to partnership in the supply chain ecosystem is just a beautiful philosophy, and would love for you to kind of share that so our audience might be able to get some good tidbits.
Oh, great question, Dan. See, sometimes it makes sense to have something tightly coupled and a vertical integration where you do everything from soup to nuts. But I think we are moving to this time of specialization as well, and seeing what is it that you're good at and focusing on that. So, for example, especially during the pandemic, we had to rethink it. We had huge dependencies on certain geographies, on certain vendors. And if we could do it from scratch, how would you do it? You want to do some nearshoring, right? You want to, which is the longest pole in the tent? How do you kind of disrupt it? And when you do it just by yourself, it does get limited. But if you bring others in the room and say, hey, this is the opportunity in front of us, how do we really solve it? And an example of that was something we did recently we were seeing that we were getting blocked by not a high cost item, but low cost item that we would only know towards the end as we are building the network in a space. We would say, oh, actually, I want this length or that length. So getting that last minute information, and then the lead times being 12 months was not helping. So we needed that last bit of manufacturing, you say, or the last bit of finishing happening closer to where we were going to use it. So working with vendors, saying what the issue is, we were able to do nearshoring, which is bringing down 80%. So in every supply chain, there are those constraints. So knowing what is a constraint versus what is your true bottleneck. So that I think, the theory of constraints, the book Goal, it still kind of resonates today, to know what is a constraint, what is your true bottleneck, solving for that. And sometimes bringing different perspectives and minds, and not treating people as vendors or this thing, but thinking more in a partnership way. Obviously, you've got to be cognizant of what is proprietary, confidential, and so on and so forth. But beyond that, being able to have this conversation, I think that becomes important, because then you start to solve things in a different way. I think the more I'm also in the office, when I'm talking to people like you, right? When I'm listening to your podcast, we are now starting, it opens up the mind. I don't think it's anything more than that, but you have to come in it with curiosity, with an open mind, and a willingness to solve problems, and for everybody to gain from that.
I think that's super important. I mean, if both parties go in wanting a win-win situation and are very collaborative on the approach, I mean, that's where you see success. So I think that's fantastic advice.
Right. And it's time and again you do that. And we talked about something like QBRs as well. You go in, but you think about what inputs are we providing you? Hey, you didn't deliver materials on time, but how good was the forecast I provided you? What could I kind of really improve? You have been supplying us materials for so long. What are you saying, as the true run rate? How do you plan your manufacturing, right? And they say, God, we don't even look at your forecast. We know what you actually use. So sometimes, our partners do know us better than we know ourselves. So these conversations do help, even in the world of generative AI.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, maybe sticking on the ML and AI topic, I'd love to hear what trends you're excited about. I mean, obviously, I got that same email about BART, so there's a lot coming down the pike. But what trends? What are you really excited about that's maybe 6, 12 months down the road that you think people should be paying attention to?
So for me right now, the most focus is, coming out of the pandemic, a lot of focus is around operational excellence. So we have to do this rapid growth and scale that Ninad was saying, hey, you're there in every country. Yeah, we are. And then there are more countries. There is more to do. There are more products. But while you're scaling, you want to be operationally, you don't want the operational excellence to drop. So both of those. So how do you leverage, it could be AI, ML, could be different things. How do you leverage that to drive scale with velocity while being super predictable? Because the thing that hurts customers is not the fact that you're 5 days late or 2 days late. If you're predictable, what hurts them is that if you're all over the shop. So you cannot say, I'm off chasing some fantastic new thing, but here I'm not being able to predictably deliver you the network you need, the capacity you need to be able to run your business. And there are a lot of, not just enterprises, consumers, everybody who depends on a stable network. So having a very resilient network resiliency becomes important. And for the network to be resilient, the supply chain has to be resilient. For the network to be reliable, the supply chain has to be reliable. And how do you use, all of the technology, all of the knowledge at your disposal to quickly make your supply chain more reliable, more resilient becomes key. How do you focus on the top things that would drive that becomes key?
Makes complete sense. Track and trace, I would imagine, is a pretty key component of driving your supply chain, right? Like,
yes,
I've seen a whole ton of tech that is out there around track and trace and edge AI and, IoT devices. And there is a whole bunch that's been going on. Like, of course, the hardware that you carry is fairly expensive, let's just call it, right? Versus, shipping Barbie cars, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you view the track and trace capability, like from a trends perspective? What's getting you excited or what has worked for you maybe?
So I think you hit the nail on the head. When you have a large network, there's a lot of hardware. You do need to know, you need to manage your assets end to end. You need to know what is where, what is working, what has stopped working. So the diagnostic element of that becomes super important. And you know where what is. So yes, we do. So when we work with our vendors, they also know that what we call in our language pingable, that you can know where the asset is, what state is it in, whether you need to augment, something, whether you need to take something out, it's ready for decommissioning. All of those kind of statuses, getting that information real time becomes super important. Now, from a supply chain point of view, because our supply chain is global, the value chain is highly complex, you also need to be able to track and know where your material is and it's in what state. Is it in finished goods? Is it in sub-assemblies? Is it in raw materials? So having that kind of insight is what helps you to manage it, streamline it in a very level, stable way. So those technologies are becoming more and more important. Even a simple example let me give, when at a pop site, there are hundreds of what we call low-cost consumables that people who are building the network, they need it, right? So we have a simple track and trace system. So as the levels go down, they just kind of it automatically places orders. We recognize what the levels we are maintaining on those site of these hundreds of parts, SKUs as we call them, and we are able to, it automatically recognizes it, looks at what it needs to be topped, places those orders, they get delivered to all corners of the world, remote corners of the world, and business continues without skipping a beat. So getting better and better at it becomes more important, as the locations become more complex, as subsea something goes wrong, you need to be making sure that, you can deliver, parts there on time. Similarly, in complex locations, we call them, it's not standard locations. Some of them are, there are no people. So how do you make sure that you can get the materials there when the tech is there to do the work that is needed?
Absolutely. So do you get a call when a subsea cable gets chewed up by a shark?
Actually, sharks do not do that. They get more, this thing by boats and ships cause much more damage. But really? We did see a very cute, I shouldn't say cute picture, but we did see a picture of a possum eating our fiber cable. And I'm like, God, somebody needs to tell that possum the lead time on that is 12 months. That is a reality, a cow storms through, or a deer, or natural weather conditions. That's where our cables are on the ground. They are overhead, they are under the sea, and these things will happen, and we need to be able to repair it. So how do you get the signal? How do you get the person to do that? How do you get the part there? And, we have an automated network. The dream or the vision for us to be truly autonomous, a network that builds itself, it repairs itself, and it constantly works. So everywhere, every moment, it's reliable, it's resilient, and it's global.
And that also then leads into, from a trend perspective, I can say specifically from a warehousing distribution standpoint, and I think in general, other areas like transportation, etc., we are seeing a lot of robotic automation coming into play, and the cost of robotic automation, right? I'll say, specifically in the United States and Canada and whatnot, in the Western world where the labor cost is a little bit higher, it's starting to show that the return on investment is fairly rapid as well, while you also get the efficiency out of these devices. How about in your universe? Like, what's like from a robotics standpoint? Like, maybe it's fixing cables.
Right. So because we have our own warehouses, we also have third-party warehouses. So when you're talking about the return on investment for, countries where the labor may not be as expensive, there are these shared services. So you've got this big, organizations that do this third-party warehousing. Go for that. You may need a small, but they have made this investment in robotics. So you still get the benefit of all of this without having to own it. And that's what I talked about. You don't have to be vertically integrated. You can rely on partnerships, right? Not in every location, I do not want to manage our own warehouses and do all of that. So there are great partners who specialize in this. So who have the latest when it comes to technology, who have the best practices processes and the best people who do it day in, day out. So why would you not leverage that? So absolutely, we have to have the best, because it's not just about building the best engineering and technology in building the network, but everything else has to follow suit. And in supply chain, that is one of our kind of that is our vision, is to make sure from knowing what we need, from delivering it, transporting it, stocking it, repairing the network. There's a reverse this thing as well, because the network at some point, it also needs to get, parts of it need to get decommissioned. They need to come back, and we have to either reuse it or scrap it. So all of these processes have to flow, and they have to flow seamlessly. For that, we do rely on, like I said, there are partnerships. You have to hold hands with many people, right? And many organizations who specialize in some parts of it, whether you say track and trace, whether it's warehousing, whether it's transportation, whether it's last mile delivery. So the complexity is there, but you don't have to build everything from scratch yourself. Just like we talked about, generative AI does 90% of it for you, and then you do the 10% on it, right?
Exactly. It's amazing.
I'd love to, maybe with the little bit of time we have left, because of your, the global work that you're doing and all the different factors that go into the work that you do with Google's supply chain, is your view on environmental factors, sustainability, and how that's kind of impacting the work you're doing around the globe. And I think over the past 24 months, sustainability has become more than a buzzword, right? People are actually doing meaningful work on that side. We've been talking about it for decades, but it's not until recent that we've really seen this focus. And, you're dealing with supply chain, you're dealing with laying wire around the world. You're covering all aspects. And from an environmental sustainability, any best practices, any advice that you would like to give the audience as they start kind of thinking about their own company's philosophy and approach?
Gosh, I don't know about advice, but you have seen, I don't know if you've heard Sundar speak about it and his vision for sustainability at Google, right? And when you're talking about networking, even outside data centers, we have to think about, sustainability from every aspect of it, but even outside. And this is where I'm thinking from a supply chain perspective, the more near shoring you can do, bring it closer to the point of use, you of course, decrease your transportation kind of footprint, you increase your kind of reduce your carbon footprint. So, and again, working with your vendors to understand what their sustainability strategy is. So again, this again comes back to partnership. Right? What are we causing in terms of, waste? What are we causing in terms of carbon footprint? What are we doing in terms of having those global impacts? Understanding that. I think in the next 2 years, it's going to become even more. There will be a lot more governance and audit around this. So as it should be. Right? Yeah. So getting ahead of it, understanding from your business, what is it? And you can't do everything day one. So, but lay out the plan, build it out, and it has to be across multiple horizons, right? It's not what is here and today, one and done. This is a continuous journey. So recognizing that and planning it out over a 15, 20-year horizon, what is it going to mean for you? And how are you going to move towards that becomes huge.
Absolutely. And I think, just to add to that, right? Like every company's got to think about like describe before prescribe, right? So like go through the process of first understanding what is your carbon footprint for every move,
what is your footprint?
Every transaction. If I'm going to put this server and ship it on in a container off to South Africa, what is the carbon footprint of me getting it from point A to point B, right? And then what is the storage carbon footprint? And then eventually figure out how are you going to try and offset? How are you going to try and remove? Because the first is, to your point, near shore. So you don't have to ship it from New York to South Africa and try and see if you can find a partner that carries that stuff out there, right? Like, so yeah, it is it starts with describe and then get to that second stage of like being able to action it to be able to then reduce it. So, no.
I think, Ninad, you said it extremely well. It's also then having that mindset. Once you get the lens with which you view it, that you learn to describe it, get your wrap your arms around it, and then you start to solve for it.
Exactly.
So for different organizations, it's a matter of doing and also acknowledging what your limitations are kind of today. But then what are you going to do differently tomorrow, and so on and so forth. So what materials you use, are they recyclable? Having these conversations with vendors about their sustainability footprint. And it's not just about offsetting your carbon footprint over tomorrow. It's like, how do you avoid it? How do you eliminate the need for it? And nearshoring, using sustainable materials, using sustainable packaging, reducing the transportation, reducing the kind of travel. The last 2 years, right, with the pandemic, none of us traveled much, right? Goods had to still travel. They got stranded in sea and air and everywhere. But it brought that business need. And when the business need was there, people looked at nearshoring.
Exactly.
So how do you make sustainability the way you do business? There shouldn't be a business need or economic need before you start to make investment in there. And I think we all talked about our kids, so we do want to leave a better world for them. And there is no bigger need than that.
But I think, Supriya, there's the other side of it, right? Like the reason why there is more sustainability adoption as well, like in corporations, I'm not talking about Google, but in general, right? In other corporations, is people were talking about it and a lot of greenwashing was happening until technology and capabilities reach that level of saying, okay, now it's also affordable to be green. And now it's only a matter of adoption of that affordable solution. So we are at a good place. So if you didn't do anything before, right, like just, corporations that might be listening, this is the right time, because you will actually save money by being sustainable because the solutions are cheaper. We speak about describe and prescribe. I think being able to describe is easier today in supply chain than it used to be 10 years ago or 15 years ago, right? Like to be able to capture what is your carbon footprint, because there are such great partners out there that you can work with to incorporate into your solutions that you will know what's your impact. So yeah, I'm pretty excited.
Absolutely. And if you don't know, just ask Bard, right?
Exactly. Yeah, just ask Bard. Yeah, exactly. If you don't know, ask Bard.
Right? You don't have to know all of the answers, but you have to make it a top of mind things. It's like everything. The right time to start is now. Whether you talk about increasing inclusion, DEI, sustainability, all of those things which we put aside sometimes in favor of economic gain, you're truly not even gaining economically. When you look at these different perspectives and angles of looking to solve something, right, describe something, you will actually make more money. You will make, like you said, you will advance your technology. That would be the thing that pushes you to make your technology cheaper, better, and more sustainable.
Absolutely.
So these are the right questions for all of us to ask and answer.
Oh, I could go on forever and ever, but
I know. I feel like if we were sitting down having some coffee or tea, we would see 6 hours pass in the blink of an eye. So,
exactly.
Supriya, this has been just an amazing visit and chat. Really appreciate you joining us. And do you want to let listeners know how they could learn more about the work you're doing, more about BART, or if you post on social media, anywhere they could follow you to see the work that you're doing?
Gosh, I need to get more active on social media. Maybe I get Bart to write some of my social media posts and things like that. But absolutely, if you go to the Google site, you look at the Google, you can learn a lot more about the Google network. You can reach out to us, through LinkedIn and find out. There are always supply chain roles. If you're interested in supply chain, do kind of reach out, talk to us. Also share what you're doing that's different, right? Because like I said, it doesn't have to be to Google. With everything that's at our disposal today, best ideas can come from anywhere in the world. It can come from anyone. So, the more of these conversations, just talking to both of you today has given me some of these ideas that I am kind of now itching to put on paper and go and do a little bit more. So we need to keep conversing, but we need to keep conversing on from a lot of different perspectives. Today we were on a lot of different mountains. We talked about AI, ML, we talked about sustainability, we talked about partnerships, we talked about, bottlenecks and, unbottlenecking, so-called your kind of issues and things like that, and about smarter technologies and so on and so forth. So sometimes we just need to do this, put the busy work aside and have some conversation. So I'm always willing for conversations over a cup of coffee or tea and learn from each other. I think the space of supply chain logistics fulfillment is so hugely rewarding that we want more of the younger generation as well kind of looking at this as potential career moves. So
Absolutely.
I'm only a ping away, like we say.
Thank you so much for joining us, Supriya.
Well, thank you. It was lovely talking to you both.
Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to maximize your supply chain. Available on all major podcasting channels. Thank you for listening and see you in the next episode.